Is Benetech scalable? If people wanted to invest in you, could you expand enough to do all the problems that people bring to you?
I definitely think Benetech is scalable. I mean, we started with a single social enterprise around making reading machines for blind people. Now we're up to 8 different products in 4 different areas of the social sector. But I want to be clear, an investment in Benetech, you know exactly what your tax loss is up front. It's 100% deductible because we're a nonprofit. We don't take for-profit investment.
Is that a hard sell in Silicon Valley? I mean, do you have any traction with venture capitalists who are primarily for-profit and don't really think about whether it's going to benefit anybody?
Well, I think we have venture capitalists on our board and as donors, so we do make that case. I think the most important thing for me to get through to a venture capitalist is this is not technology business done badly, but philanthropic and social good done incredibly effectively. And as long as they change their frame from why isn't this going to make a boatload of money to wow, you mean my charitable dollar goes 10 times further with this project, then I can actually get through to them and get them to become supporters of ours.
And charity is a huge business in this country. People give away billions and billions of dollars, so if you're doing something worthwhile, no reason why you shouldn't get a piece of that pie.
Well, and I think we're part of a class of innovators called social entrepreneurs. People are trying to solve social problems in a new way, and the world does need charity. I mean, if you've just been hit by a tsunami, you need charity, right? But I think what a lot of people have observed is that often charity misapplied doesn't actually solve the social problem. I mean, after you've gotten your immediate aid, you need to get back into a job. You need to get back into your own house. You don't need a tent city indefinitely. And I think that's where the social entrepreneurs really come in. We're trying to take people who are not very employable and help them be employable. We're trying to take people who are working on really important issues and give them the tools they need to be more effective at it. And that provides the kind of leverage that venture capitalists and Silicon Valley people are used to using to make money. We want to use that same leverage to do maximum social good.
I'm going to ask you what some of the most important social problems are, but before I do that, you brought a few devices to demonstrate to us, which is part of your work. So maybe you can show us what you've got here.
That sounds great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and bring up a couple of tools. Now, these are actually used with our Bookshare digital library. And Bookshare is essentially sort of, I would say, Amazon meets Napster meets talking books to the blind dyslexic, but legal. The idea is that we use electronic books to take a book that someone can't read the print version of and turn it into something they can access. Now, right now, I'm showing off a Braille display. So this is what a blind person would use. And so they would download the book from Bookshare, let's say of Mice and Men or something like that. They would actually run their fingers along the Braille cells, which have popped up Braille characters for each one. And then when they get to the end of the line, they hit a button, and it pops up the next line of Braille characters. And then the next line of Braille characters. So basically, what this device is it's an entire book library in Braille for a blind person that can hold 1,000 or 5,000 books. And then we have another tool. So that helps blind people.
And what did Benetech do for that? Did you create the device or create the books? What was
We
Benetech's
create the
part?
books. We fill up these devices with books. So we have 40 different technology partners that build different tools for people with different kinds of disabilities. And then we essentially provide the content that those books turn into: speech, MP3, large print, Braille. And the tool I'm going to show you right now is actually for people who are dyslexic primarily. And it's called Read to Go. And it's an app on the iPad. And so essentially, this has a direct connection through Wi-Fi to our Braille library. And actually, it's not just a Braille library, it's a digital text library. And so I've downloaded a book. This happens to be Hatchet. And what I can do is actually hit the play button.
Anything. When he had rested a bit, he went back down to the lake and drank a couple of swallows of water. He wasn't all that thirsty, but he thought the water might help to take the edge off his hunger.
Now, I can set this to be larger, different colors. I can speed up the voice and the reading. But the whole idea is that as a dyslexic student, actually this karaoke-style presentation of the text helps the dyslexic person actually see and hear each word. Because a lot of dyslexic kids aren't so good at decoding words, sounding them out, figuring them out, but often they become decent sight readers. So once you've given them a complicated word and told them what it sounds like, then they know that word. The next time they see it, they'll be more likely to be able to read it without having to have a device read it to them. So, but we have 250,000 users using our library and using many of these different tools, whether it's a MP3 player in their pocket, an Android phone, an iPhone, an iPad, an Android tablet, a PC, a Mac, a specialized device like the Braille display. The whole idea is we've turned print books they can't read into books they can read.
What kind of feedback do you get? Do you get a lot of positive feedback, people telling you this really helped them a lot?
Well, and I do think that's part of why I keep doing it. I remember I told my wife I'd do this nonprofit thing for a year, and that was 24 years ago. So it's pretty sticky. When someone comes up and says, I got through college because of you, or my dyslexic kid, got through high school because they could actually read, that makes an engineer feel pretty good. I think it's a lot of what motivates the team at Benetech. We have 75 tech people based here in Palo Alto, and we love building these tools because we see our professional skills actually benefiting people that normally would get ignored by typical tech companies.
Now, what do you think are the most important social problems that you could be working on? Is it problems of the individual? An individual has a problem, or is it a group problem, a whole class of people has a problem?
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all. So we build tools that are mainly focused on helping individuals, like our reading tools. I mean, the ultimate user is a blind and dyslexic person or a returning vet with a physical disability. But a lot of the rest of our work is actually aimed at helping organizations. So human rights groups, right? They're working on huge injustice around the world. And we have users in more than 100 countries reading a dozen different languages for human rights technology. And that actually helps us sort of take information, generally they're the stories of human rights abuse, and make sure they don't lose them. Because when we first talk to human rights groups, 95% of the stories that get given to a human rights group disappear within 5 years. Sometimes because the government suppresses it, sometimes because the group runs out of money, sometimes because termites ate the files, sometimes it's because the computer crashed. We want to make sure they actually have the information, and then we hope that they're actually going to use it to pursue a human rights objective, whether that's talking to a reporter about human rights abuse, or convincing people that the police are misbehaving, or that this minority group is being abused, or this group is being abused because of their identity. We want to make sure they have those stories, and then over time, when you build up a lot of stories, if you have 10,000 stories, that's a powerful asset for advocacy.
So it sounds like there's a bit of political controversy sometimes because maybe you're taking sides in a conflict, and conflicts can be hard to judge. The weaker party is not necessarily the one that has more justice on its side, although it may be. And you investigate the situations and see what is really going on and what are people really fighting about.
Well, people want to get down to the truth somehow, right? And that's often tough to find. And the interesting thing is, we are not a human rights group. We're the geeks that help human rights groups. And people find that surprising because they say, well, aren't you on this side? Aren't you on the side of the Syrian rebels? And we're like, well, no, we're actually on the side of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? We're here to see human rights is upheld. And if we're collecting data about a conflict and a Syrian military officer's family is killed at their home, that's a human rights abuse, even if it happens to be by someone who's associated with the current regime. And so many times people ask us the question, who did what to whom? And what is their differential liability? I mean, if the regime, and I'm not talking about Syria here, but if the regime killed 10 times more people than the rebels, well, what does that mean? We'll let the courts, public opinion, the Truth Commission, the War Crimes Tribunal decide what it means. Our job is making sure the data is as close to being accurate as possible, because then we think people will make better policy and better justice.
Now I'm going to ask you some questions about the core principles that are behind your work, but before I do that, we have some still images, some slides which we're going to show.
Oh, great.
So let's go ahead and view the first slide, and maybe you can tell us what that is.